Hey everybody, it's Brian. Good to see you. Oh my goodness, I haven't seen myself. Let me make sure I'm in good shape for this today. Hey, happy Friday. Glad to see everybody here. And today we're talking about one of my favorite subjects. It is building cause and effect diagrams to help us organize ourselves, help us stay on track, and then help us map out all the different ways and inputs and all of that, the kinds of events that we are performing root cause analysis on. So it's actually super fun. I think I like this subject more than any other. Is that true? Anyway, well, in any case, I like it a lot. And then I think you guys are going to like it too. So why don't we do this? I'm going to share my screen with you. And I'm working by myself today too. I don't have Michelle with me. And that's because she is off at her sister's wedding, but I'll catch up with her maybe in a couple of weeks. She'll be back on with us. So, assuming that you can see my screen. So, listen, if you want to ask questions or participate, I would love it. I got to do it kind of through the chat feature and all of that. So I'm going to organize my screen a little bit to make sure that everybody is visible. But just send me a note, right? And just let me know because I'm hopeful that we'll have some questions and as much as we can interact with each other. And I'm hoping that you learn something out of this too. So I mean, obviously, I guess that's my main goal. But and if you like the subject, if you think that this is something that would be interesting internally or you want to replay it, first we record all of these and then we post them on our website and then you can check it all out there. I also write a blog entry for each of these webinars that we do, and then I post that on our site. And along with that blog entry, it comes in, you can look at it on the website itself, but I'm also doing PDF forms of the blog entry, which allow you to download and share. So there's a lot of ways to get the information that we share on these webinars out to your teams. Our whole goal with this is to I guess just share an hour of education and hope that you have some fun and get something good out of it. Share it with your teams. I'll do this webinar internally for you too. So if there's something that you want for your internal folks, if you're doing something that is you need to fill up some time on your schedule or you want them to learn internally, no problem. Happy to do a repeat. Just reach out. My email's probably best. You got my email address right here and this webinar or any others too. So if you see anything on the list and you think, man, I think our teams internally would really like to hear that, you can schedule it on your own time, the time that works for you folks, and just let us know. All right. So here we'll dig in a little bit. If you don't know about Sologic, I am here in Seattle, and I want to say that soon all of the Sologic will be based in Seattle. We're currently in Midland, Michigan. I think we're there for just another month or so, and we will be from that point forward based in Seattle. So that's a little bit of inside news that I haven't really let out, but that's coming soon. And but we're around the place. The place meaning the world. We got a presence in Mexico, presence in Sao Paulo, Buenos Aires, Hong Kong, New South Wales. We will you don't see England on here. Currently, we're servicing Europe and the UK out of the United States, but that's about to change. I know that we're making really good progress on bringing a team on based in the UK, which is going to be great. And then in the Middle East too. So we have a presence in the Middle East, so we can cover it wherever you happen to be. We work in a ton of different industries and we work in a ton of different disciplines, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think the takeaway here is that problem solving is useful no matter where you're from, no matter what you're doing, wherever it is that you work. And this form of structured problem solving, I've been using the term organizational learning, is I just think that it's critical. I just don't think that you can operate kind of by seat of your pants, ad hoc problem solving, really, and expect to be successful or competitive in today's markets. So something it doesn't have to be so logic, but something like this, where you have a structured way of addressing problems, learning from those problems, putting improvements in place. I mean, I just don't see how you can get by without something like this in your organization. So we actually work in all of these different places, and we work with a ton of different companies too. All right. So you can find out more about us on Sologic.com or by emailing me or whatever. I think I'm done with the Sologic pitch at this point, and I want to talk about the topic. All right. So I kind of alluded to this already. Why this topic? And today, what we're learning today is building a cause and effect analysis, using building a cause and effect chart to help you work through an organizational learning event. And so, why is that so important? Well, I'm going to speak mostly from my own experience with this, and I've been doing it for a long time. And you should know a little bit about my background. I don't come from engineering. I am from originally, my degree was in finance, and I spent a lot of time working in accounting and then also a bit in finance and corporate finance, not Wall Street finance. I when I found myself working originally for Apollo and now for Sologic, I was out of my element entirely, pretty much. And I'm working with these great big companies, uh, like Dow Chemical, like Honeywell, like Boeing, like General Electric, and working on pretty much engineering problems, things that fail, people getting hurt, things going boom, stuff like that. And I was forced to drink from a fire hose, as it were, to try to get up to speed with all these different things that we were investigating, and then the folks that we were teaching, the folks that would end up in our classes. And so what I tried to put a brave face on it, right? Like, because, what do you do when you're tasked with doing something that, you technically are supposed to be able to do it, but maybe you haven't done it so often before, and you're not really feeling that confident inside. And that pretty much describes me in my early 30s trying to get my feet off the ground doing this root cause analysis stuff. And what I found, and I think that challenge early on, what I found is that having a structured process, I guess, to fall back is one way of putting it, but to follow uh, a roadmap of where I was and what I had done and what I needed to do next, and then kind of drilling in from there, knowing that there's quite a lot of support if I were to dig into each of the main steps of the process that I was following. That it wouldn't be that, that there's something there that I can follow, even though the topic itself, or whatever the subject of whatever it was that we're investigating, was completely foreign to me, and that I had never been experiencing it before. So, and now when we're drilling into process, Sologic has 5 steps: gather and manage data, write the problem statement, analyze the causes. That's where we are today. That's where we are today. And then identify solutions and then put things together into the final report. That cause and effect analysis part, that was the part that really helped me understand and feel like I was able to effectively facilitate a group of experts through one of these complex adverse event analyses. And that's why the topic is, because I think that if it helped me, then it can help you. And I was a person that needed a ton of help. Okay. And so what I'm hopeful, what I'm hopeful of is that you will also learn what I learned, and you'll be able to put it to work, or at least know that this is out there, and that with a little bit of practice, then it can work for you too. So hopefully that gives you insight into why I think this is just so important. And I do think it is critically important. All right. So as we get off the ground here with the webinar, I have been using this slide to give us all a common mental model so it can sort of situate where you are mentally, where you put this topic kind of overall in the structured learning world, or the structured learning experiences. So what I like to do is start at the top of the slide and discuss this from the context of any specific learning opportunity. Why I use learning opportunity is that it doesn't lock us into an adverse event. It also doesn't lock us into something specific like a failure modes effects analysis on a particular piece of equipment. It allows us to discuss basically any scenario in which we want to learn and learn more about how things are functioning inside that scenario. And it can be event based. It can be a little bit broader than that, not any one event. But so learning opportunity is broad enough for basically this mental model to sort of take hold. And what I like about this graph is that it puts us right here in the center. This little green dot is us in the present moment. Okay? We can only exist right here in the present. It's the only place where we can do anything, learn, take action, whatever. Here we are right now in that present moment. And we can choose, like making choices. What are we going to do as of right now? Like, what am I going to say to you in the next few minutes? I have to make that decision. But the only place I can make that decision is right here. And the only place I can execute on that decision is right here. So, what the hell am I going to do? Well, I can retrospectively look backwards and look at what I've done in the past and say, well, what did I do that worked? What did I do that didn't work so well? And how does that inform the actions that I take in this present moment? I can also look ahead to say, well, where do I want to get to? When do I want to get there? What's my goal? And then what steps might I take one after the other in order to lead me there? So that's me in the present looking forward. That's more of a proactive, a proactive exercise in putting steps together so that if we take those steps, we're going to arrive the place that we're going, the time that I had hoped that we would get there. Right. So I can either look backwards or forwards. And in doing this, when we have a learning opportunity, it's best when we have ideas and information that come from diverse sources. Right now, this is all coming from me today, but it's based on, if you think about it, if I were to map out all of the diversity and the diverse learning sources that have shaped the stuff that I'm telling you today, it's going to be a lot. It's going to be a lot because I've kind of done a lot over the last 25 years, right? So, but even if you're talking about an individual event, like we're going to use as an example in a while, it's nice to have diverse sources of ideas and information. And what's not listed here, individual diverse brains thinking about the problem, that are working on the problem in a complex yet different way from each other, because that's going to give you, when you think about it, a lot of compute power to put towards what it is that we're focusing on. Now, you also need process. So process is what we do to stay on track. And I'm going to be primarily focused on a very structured way of organizing what we learn from these folks. Okay. Now, note that I've got a continuum here from structured to unstructured. The reason that I think it's important to have this sort of continuum listed out is that the best RCA facilitators or FMEA facilitators or learning team facilitators or whatever it happens to be, they know when to push structure and they also know when to pull structure back. And it's almost like probably, what's a good example? I'm going to just pluck something out of the air. Maybe like driving a car on a hill. When do you push the gas down? Well, you feel yourself slowing down. Well, you push the gas a bit and you're going to get that speed back up, right? To where you're kind of optimally cruising along. Or when you up over the top of the hill and you're about to head down the other side, maybe you pull back, you attenuate that gas, or maybe you even tap the brakes periodically, right? So that's kind of the way that I think about running one of these learning opportunities with a group of people, is that we want to put the learning first. It's most important for me for them to be learning as much as they can in the time that's allotted to us. And sometimes they're going to need a lot of structure. I'm going to have to push the gas forward. Other times I'm going to have to get out of the way. I'm going to have to take the gas off. And so knowing how much process and how little process to apply Well, guess what? You do that in the moment. You do that in the moment based on the feedback and the signals that you're getting from your team. Okay, so the rest of this I'll be quick about. Share and scale what we've learned, and then also you need a way to store what you've learned so that there's a reference for future learning. Okay, so I think all of this is how we make the best use of our learning opportunities so that we can make the best possible decisions in the current moment. We're going to look backwards, we're going to look forwards, we're going to have diverse ideas and information, the right amount of process, the ability to share and scale, and then also a place where we can store things as a reference for future learning. All right. So hopefully that makes sense. I got a couple other things down here. Human and organizational performance. If you're a HOP person, this is what HOP does best. Sologic and Coslink, we do the rest of this. Now, a cause and effect diagram, I really like the idea of analogies and metaphors, right? So, and in fact, I'm a musician of dubious quality. I played bass guitar for a long time since I was 13. So I mean, geez, that's got to be, it's like 40 something years. That seems strange, but I mean, I can do it, right? And when I first started doing it, the requirement was my dad's requirement was, hey, you can play bass. I'll even buy you a bass, but you better learn to play it in the band. And in order to play it in the band, I had to learn to read music. Luckily, I'd already played trombone, so I had the bass clef down. I knew what the notes were, but I knew what the notes were on the trombone, right? So I knew where the B flat was or whatever. But I didn't know where they were on the bass guitar. So as long as though I could recognize where the B line was on the bass clef, and then all I needed to do was know what fret B flat was on the bass guitar, and then I could kind of transpose it. And I still remember the first song I learned was Michael Jackson's "Beat It," right? So you can sing the bass line in your head. I won't do it for you. Hmm. What was so cool about that experience was uh, I'm staring at the note, at the music, right? And I'm like, oh my God, it's kind of like not making any sense to me. And but then I started kind of just working the notes out, like finding the notes on the fret, because I kind of did all this on my own. I didn't really have a teacher. And so once I sort of transposed where the note was, where the fret was, and then I started sounding out. It started to sound a little bit like that bass line for Beat It that you know so well. If you know the song at all, and I don't know what rock you're hiding under, if you don't know it, right? So, and 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 then what was really interesting in that very first session of trying to learn that music on my own, um, I heard the music in my head, okay, which is kind of how I learned to play bass guitar in the first place, was playing along with records. So I wasn't using notes, I was mimicking what I heard. And if it didn't sound right, then I adjusted a fret up or a fret down until made the noises that sounded like the noises coming out of the record player. But then when I saw the notes on the actual screen itself, well, now I've got a visual map and a visual reference, and it didn't take very long for me to map what I was hearing in my head versus what I'm hearing coming out of the amp versus what I'm seeing on the screen. And so while it takes a bit of effort to learn to map out these notes and to know what they mean, and what do you do when you got two at the same time, and well, what about all this other stuff going on? This is very complicated and confusing. With a little bit of practice and a little bit of effort, you actually become very proficient at it. And someone puts a piece of sheet music in front of you. Now, I'm nowhere near this quality, but these top level session musicians show up, and they never heard the song before because no one's ever heard the song before. They put the music in front of them, they look at it, and they interpret it, right? They can see the notes in front of them on the sheet. They can hear those notes in their brain, and then their fingers are going to make the notes come out of the amplifier, and then you end up with the song like by the Beach Boys or something like that, right? So um it's the same thing. The reason I'm spending a little time here is that what we do in order to facilitate learning is I've got to have a way of notating what I hear come out of people's mouths in these sessions. I got to write it down. Well, I could write it down here. Here's my notebook, which is never very far away. I keep it right next to me all the time, writing, 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 writing. And guess what? My writing is so, like, I don't know, even if I'm looking at the page that's right here. My handwriting is actually pretty good on this page. And by the way, it varies from day to day. But there are some fundamental problems with using writing in narrative form to try to keep track of how, or to model how an event happened. And I'm going to talk about that just right now. Okay, so let's say that I spilled some coffee or I spilled some water. You see me taking drinks in my coffee cup. Mm. Here, I'm gonna spill a little bit for you. Keep up now. Oh, can you see it? I can't. I'm gonna trust. Oh yeah, trust me that it's spilled. Now I better drink it. All right. So that's what I would call an event. And so while my slide says spilled water, I use coffee. I don't know that you would know the difference, but it would be weird for me drinking water out of this disposable coffee cup, I guess. But in any case, you can get it. It's going to work no matter what the liquid was. So I'm going to start out with the event that I want to understand. And so let me put this into context. So in real life, someone comes to you and says, "Hey, I've got this root cause analysis, or we're going to be investigating this event." I always start out with, "Well, why don't you tell me what happened? Someone tell us what happened." I don't even care where they start. I don't care what, I give them zero guidance as to, well, what the hell is going on here? That's pretty much as technical as it gets at first. Yeah, well, we got all these parts from our supplier. These parts we're going to use them to build this offshore oil platform. Okay, so we got lots of parts coming in. We're staging all these parts before they go on the ships and they go out to be installed on the platform. And we found that these fittings, they did not pass the non-conform, they didn't pass the conformity quality check for adhesion for the coating that the supplier put on them. And so now we've got all of these parts. They've been coated, but they didn't pass our field level quality test. And then we went back and checked the paperwork, and we found that they had actually been built to a previous and now defunct specification. So I got all these parts out there, and I'm gonna have to reject them. Interesting. Okay, there you go. Well, so what's the problem? Well, so now you've got this quality, and I've told you something different than what we're dealing with here, because it doesn't really matter what the problem is. You got to know a little bit about it in order to, the term that I use is get on the board, so it's kind of like the beginning of a game where you're starting out, and it's like one of those games where you need a certain hand in order to start playing, like rummy or something like that. All right, well, you need a certain amount of information in order to start playing. And so the story that I just told you about non-conforming parts, well, that's exactly how it starts out. And they're like, well, so what else do you want to know? Well, probably a lot, but you've given me something to go by. I need a starting point, and then I call that starting point the focal point. Okay, so in this case, because we're focusing on spilled water, it's the focal point. If I was focusing on non-conforming parts, well, guess what? And that's what I'm going to put here. Or if I had machine downtime, well, I'm going to put that here, right? So what I'm really looking for is a beginning point. And even if I've chosen a beginning point that I think is, going to be the reasonable starting point for us to begin our investigation, I leave myself a little latitude that it's like, hey, you know what? I may find that we need to make an adjustment on this either, and maybe I'll talk about that. It's maybe a little out of scope for today's discussion, but spilled water, for instance, what if that spilled water got onto my computer, and now my problem is that my computer is destroyed? Why? Because I spilled some water on it, right? So I leave myself some latitude to make adjustments. Okay, but I got to start somewhere. Spilled water works for me here. And I ask why, or what caused the water to spill. Some variation on that question. That's how I go from here to here. And then I ask another question. Every time I tip a container over, does it always result in spilled water? Okay, so I'm basically outlining a two-question process. What caused the effect? Every time that cause occurs, does it always result in this effect? This is 100% process. So if we were to go back to my slide on process, now I'm dialed the process way the heck up, right? I've got it totally dialed up. Process is, in this case, identify the focal point, ask why, and then ask every time that cause occurs, does it always result in the effect? In this case, the spilled water. The thing is that it almost always, I'm going to be careful here. In fact, I'm going to say it always. There are always at least two or more causes or causal contributors for every effect. I don't always find utility in identifying all of them or in actually writing all of them out. But right now we've dialed process all the way up. And so I can say that for any given effect, there are at least two or more causal contributors. And so I find those by asking this question. Every time I tip a container over, does it spill water? And the answer is no. Okay. And I can imagine, and you can too, several different, probably many different scenarios where you tip a container over and nothing spills out of it. Okay, so that means that we're solving for a missing variable. And in this case, that missing variable is there needs to be water in the container. Now, if I tip, and you saw me do that with the coffee, right? You saw me tip the coffee cup and you saw some coffee spill out of it. That's because there's coffee in it. Okay. Now, I don't know if I have one here. Let's have a look. I normally get coffee every day, so this one's got nothing in it, right? So if I tip this cup over and nothing comes out of it, why is that? Because there's nothing in it, right? So you might be thinking to yourself, well, that's ridiculous. How could you spill coffee if there wasn't any coffee in the container? Of course, there has to be coffee in the container. Of course, there has to be something in there if you tip it over. It's understood that there must have been something in there. And that's where people make a big mistake, especially when we're dealing with investigating events and trying to understand events. We do not want to take anything for granted. I want to explicitly state what was happening during the event. I did tip the container. There was water in it. That plus that resulted in this. Okay. And so I not again process on 11 at this point. This is as right now I'm treating this as rigidly as if you were doing a mathematical equation. So when we teach this stuff, we dial it up 100%. And remember, I said that we have to know when to attenuate it. Okay, well, that's true too, but right now we are not. So when we spill the water, when we tip the glass over, we see that that if you upset a container and it's got water in it, then water spills. Okay. Actually, when you really start to break this stuff down, you look at the tipping of the water. Okay. Let me back up here. Tipping the container and water in the container, these are actually pretty different when you look at the different, I guess, the nature of each of these contributors, is the word I'm going to use. In this particular box, tipped container, I've got an active verb, tipped container. And then you can see it happen when I tip the container. Okay, so that's actually, there's something happening there. Whereas water or coffee in the container, well, coffee's been in the container the whole time we've been running the webinar. All right, so it's more of a statement of the status of the container at the time that this action occurred. Okay, so now that's something I think that deserves a little bit of soak time. If you're not used to this kind of thinking, this is an area where you have to train your brain. Is water in a container a cause of spilled water? I say yes because I call all of these things causes. And I can say, well, it is a cause because if it wasn't there, then this event wouldn't have occurred. Some people have argued with me on that. And you know what? I decided not to argue anymore about semantics. The person in mind, he said, no, dude, it's not a cause, it's a necessary condition. Okay. If that's the word that works for you, that works for me. I can make that adjustment just fine, so long as we still agree that the logic has to hold. Okay, so logic has to hold. Um, Let me make sure that there's no chats here. So I just working normally, if I'm working with Michelle, then she's going to point out to me when I have a question. So if I miss your question, don't worry, I'm going to check in periodically. The reason I'm spending so much time on a simple event like this too is we start simple, but we leverage up pretty quick. Okay, so it's more about sort of training your brain to think about each of these different ingredients, right? So, what caused the glass to transition from being upright to being on its side? This was the point in time where the water changed from being contained in the glass to being spilled on the table. Now, the operative word here is change. That is the thing that we're looking at as an event unfolds, is when things change, and also the things that are involved in that change. Now, note that the design of the glass is also a reason or an explanation for why the water was allowed to come out. Um, Here, I've actually got tea cooking here as well. So coffee time's almost over, tea time's about to begin. And I've got a lid on the top of this. That lid, it's not 100% perfect. It's got an air hole and a place to drink out of, but it keeps from slopping most of the coffee out if I jostle it around, or the tea or whatever it happens to be in there too much. So that open top design is also a contributor. Okay. And we label these causes. Okay, tipping the container, because it's a point of change, we label it as a transitory cause. The water in the container, my buddy says that's a necessary condition. Well, I see it a little differently. I see it as something that's not changing or non-transitory. Same thing with the opening at the top of the container. That is also non-transitory. So what are these labels? I would say that a transitory cause is a trigger or a point of change, that point where things change into something else. You can almost always tell the transitory cause because you have a active verb, tipped container. Non-transitory causes are things involved in the change. The water is involved in the change. The opening at the top of the container is involved in the change, but they're not the change themselves. In fact, without the tipping, you have water in a container that has an opening at the top of it. Okay, that's kind of what I have sitting on my desk right now. So it takes all three of these together in order to create this new state of existence, which is water or coffee or tea or whatever spilled onto the desk. So you've got the point of change or the trigger, and then you've got the things involved, water in the container, and then the opening at the top of the container. Now, if you're like, wow, this is a lot to learn, well, so is music, right? When you're learning to read music, it feels overwhelming at first, and then you give it a little, just a little juice. I'm telling you that what we're talking about here is something that every single 14-year-old is capable of learning and probably should. Okay. So when you look around you, just look around you right now and look at all the things, and all of them just sitting there, not doing anything. Okay. I'm looking at my desk. Here's my sunglasses. All right. Here's my reading glasses. So now look, it changed from reading glasses to sunglasses. I've got things and I've got changes that are happening. And when you think about this as a model, it's a pretty neat model, right? Because when you look around and think about how things have changed over the course of your day, you've got the things that are like involved, and then you've got the other, like the triggers or the things that are triggering them to change into some new state or status. And when you're trying to understand events and you've got this sort of a model that you can hang it on, that actually becomes a very powerful model. Okay, so formally, transitory causes are transition points, energy transfers, change in state or status, an external force applied, an operation performed, a trigger, a catalyst, or a decision point. And often the last cause to present, because the other ones were sitting there waiting for something to happen or not. Okay. Now, non-transitory causes are objects, tangible things like hardware, systems, environment They can be intangible too: goals, standards, procedures, rules, laws, training, specifications, right? So things that are, you can't really hold them, but you can't say they don't exist. The properties and attributes of those. All right, here's a property. It's white. It's paper. The cup is black. It's plastic. These, a property or attribute is something that is not that's fundamental to the material or the thing. Can't really easily change it. You could say, oh, well, just color it black. Okay, yeah, you could, I guess, but my point is that an attribute is, it's more of an identifying feature that doesn't really change. Um, the status, things like quantity, coffee right now is up to here. That's a status because it started out up here. And guess what? It's about to go lower. Ooh, let's drink the whole thing, right? So now the status is there is no coffee in the cup. And quantity, velocity, position, location, all of this. And so again, my process meter is dialed up to 11 here because we're talking about a mental model that you can use once you sort of embrace all of this. Then what ends up happening, let me fast forward to the end. When you really understand all this stuff and you've got given it a little bit of practice, you become like that session musician where you walk in, you have your instrument, they put the music in front of you, they hit record, and you do it right. First take. That's what ends up happening. It's like, that's amazing. How did you do that? Well, you practiced a little bit. And you also had some process and you had some tools and structure that really helped you do it. And that's ultimately where people that are really good at root cause analysis, really good at incident investigation, or at least just untangling events, that's where they end up. Okay, so we can also, I'm gonna fly through a couple other things here. Omissions. This is like the anti-cause. Okay, so omissions are the absence of something that should have been there or should have been in place, right? So they can be transitory or non-transitory. It's almost like if you think about negative numbers. Well, if the cup was the water spilled, why? Because the bottle was upset. Okay, well, lid not on the bottle is a legitimate cause for why the water spilled. The Because it was designed for a lid, you could reasonably say that there's a should in there that but for the lid being off, the water would not have spilled. The intent was to have the lid on, that sort of thing. We got to be a little bit careful with omissions. They're a little bit tricky for reasons I'm probably not going to delve into too much, but that's why the word should is actually pretty important. Is there reasonable to think that if that particular ingredient had not been omitted, that the event would not have occurred? It was reasonable to assume that it should have been there. Okay, so like if someone omits a step in a procedure, for instance, well, it was, and I'm not judging them for doing it, I'm just stating that they did, right? So they did step 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, but they skipped step 2. That's a legitimate omission. Now we can dig into that and we can ask why or how was that step omitted. Okay. All right. So I see you got a chat. This is from Yusuf. Is there any question to help us to determine possible omissions? Well, Yusuf, let me see if I can. I mean, yes. When I see your question like that, I haven't written one down, okay? But let me think about this for a minute. Let's go back to the procedure step. And let's actually go all the way back up to the nonconformity example that I used earlier. So, okay, you building an offshore oil platform, you're getting all of your components and parts in place before you load them onto the ship to take them out to the construction site. And we noticed that there was a nonconformity in the coding of the equipment that's going to be installed on the platform. Got to reject it, right? And so when you drill back in, you realize, oh my goodness, you omitted the step of surface prep to the level required, right? They didn't take it to the required level of surface prep. Can you say that, didn't prep surface to level required, did not, that in and of itself is an omission. It's something they did not do. Is it legitimate for us to say that? And you can say, yes, it is, because in the revised version of the procedure, it states it very clearly that surface prep must go to this specific level of preparation prior to proceeding with coating the parts. Um, and so I always look at each situation uniquely, and I say, well, is it reasonable to assume that what was omitted should have been done? And so if it's a step in a procedure, then yes, absolutely. Now I'm going to drill in. I'm not judging too, by the way. So I don't want you guys to ever be afraid. I want to say this right. I don't want you to ever be afraid of looking at an omission, at recognizing that someone didn't do something that they were supposed to do. I feel like I don't want to call it a weakness, but it's a propensity in the world of human and organizational performance these days, to avoid blaming people. Well, don't ask that question. Don't ask why they omitted this step. It's like, oh gosh, I think that's a bridge too far, frankly. I think you have to ask, well, why did you guys omit that step? I think it's how you ask the question that becomes important. But I think that it's absolutely imperative that you drill into that, because if you don't do that, then you won't. Maybe someone else, you're setting someone else up for failure. You probably got a gap in communication or a gap in procedure or something like that rolls those things out so that people, or maybe a gap in training. We need to understand where those are, and we can't get there unless we ask the question. Okay, we don't have to make someone, but by asking the question, it doesn't mean that we're blaming them for the problem. So, is there a question to help us determine possible omissions? Should something have been there that would have prevented this? I think that's a pretty good question. Was there a safeguard in place or a safeguard that exists that we reasonably should have had? The danger is, though, that you walk in there with a solution in mind. Oh, I know what we're going to do here. I know I've been meaning to retrain all of these people on a particular process step for the last year. I've been denied. But now that I've got this problem, I'm going to walk in with my chosen solution of retraining, and I'm going to reverse engineer the absence of my chosen solution as a quote unquote omission cause of the problem. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but basically, someone walks in there, hey, I know what the outcome is that I want, and then they find a way to call the absence of their chosen outcome as a direct cause of the problem. That's not okay. All right. So listen, contact me on offline too. We can have a discussion about it in greater detail, but I appreciate your question. All right. Um, so I want to dig a little deeper too. I'm watching the time. Because I want to do an example, and I think the examples are where things really shine. So I'll dial back process here just a little bit. Necessary and sufficient test is a classic test of causality. A single cause cannot satisfy both parts of the test. In other words, no single cause can be both necessary and sufficient in order to result in an effect. In other words, tipping a cup or tipping a container alone is not enough to spill something out of it, right? You need the combination of causes to establish sufficiency, right? You need all three of these things in order. Now, each of them alone is necessary, right? Necessary can be single cause. Is it necessary to tip the container for the water to spill? Yes. Is it necessary for something to be in there for the water to spill? Absolutely. Do we need a way for the water to come out? Yes. Is it sufficient for any one of these? No. Sufficiency is established when we put the combination of causes together. All right. So, I think I'm going to blow through this. This is my training deck, right? So, we have a little more time in class to dig through all of this stuff, but um, I I'll illustrate this last one. I'll get to the chart. One of the things that we do often, also this is more of a charting technique that helps us, I guess, stay organized and stay on track, and also helps us manage complexity. Okay, so here, I've got a child injured, minor concussion. All right, not great, but we're gonna get through this one. And that's because they hit their head on the playground surface with sufficient force to result in a concussion. All right. So just hitting your head on the playground surface isn't enough. You kind of got to hit it a little harder. All right. So it's a combination of these. Um, I we call this kind of a cause, sufficient force, a compressed cause. And the reason is that sometimes we leave it sort of just rolled up. We just say, well, there was enough force there to cause a concussion, and it's not very specific, and it doesn't need to be because we decided, we know enough about the problem at that point. But what if we want to dig a little bit further? I'm now going to unpack that cause of sufficient force. And sufficient force, that is actually an expression of a differential. The force required for a concussion is greater than or equal to 95 G. Is that right? That just seems like a lot. Let me consult my handy dandy because I now, and by the way, you got me. I just don't like it. I feel like I might have missed a decimal point. How much force in G does it take to cause a concussion? I'm asking my buddy. You know who I'm asking. Um, hmm Oh, 60 to 100 G of linear acceleration. Mhm. There it is. So I'm going to go with the 95. Let's say a force required for concussion is not is greater than or equal to 95. I mentioned that there's a differential. The actual force exceeded that, and that was because of the height of the fall being 5 feet, the unprotected exposed head, and then also the ground material itself was hard. Okay, so when you add all of these up, the height of the fall, the noggin, just out there being ahead. Um, and then the fact that you've got this hard asphalt material, add that up, and now you're going to get an actual force exceeding 95 G. Well, we've said that that's our threshold. 60 to 100 actually, so it was grossly in excess of, if we go by what I just looked up. And that plus that equals sufficient force such that when the head strikes the ground, the child um, receives a minor concussion. All right, so if I can this is an example, y'all, of how I might use cause and effect analysis and charting specifically. Let's see if we can kind of roll all of this up. Um, what I want to do here, let me back up. So hey, Brian, you need to get out there and do an RCA. We had an injury on the playground today. A child had a minor concussion. Okay, so I start out with my story, and then I get my focal point. I say, "Wow, so how did that happen?" Well, they hit their head on the playground, and I'm like, "Okay, well, must not have been, must have been kind of a hard hit, right? There must have been enough force to result in a concussion." Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know. They hit it pretty hard. Okay, well, let's see if we can figure out, what's going on there because, it had to have been harder than 95 Gs and it could have even been a little bit, lighter than that. So, how can we calculate the actual force? Well, first off, they weren't wearing a helmet. Okay, well, that's fine. But every time somebody isn't wearing a helmet and they hit their head, does that mean there's enough force, to cause a concussion? No, 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 because we hit our head most of the time without a helmet on, and certainly we don't end up with concussions. And it's like, well, what about this? They fell from on top of those monkey bars, and let's measure them. Evidence, right? So, okay, well, we got 5 feet, unexposed head. Well, geez, now we get it. Yeah, well, guess what else? The ground is asphalt. Well, that plays a role. All right, that does. So now as we're telling the story, and then we're using our cause and effect logic to basically ask additional details. What else had to be there? And then once we learn what those are, the method that I'm showing you gives me a place to put them. And I do this at this point like like I don't even think about it. Like this is second nature for me, whether I'm using sticky notes, okay, whether I'm using Coslink, whatever. My brain is tuned to think, what's the problem? What is this cause? That cause alone can't be enough. What else had to be there? Was there anything else? I'm constantly kind of solving causal equations and then documenting them as I go. Okay. And why that mental process and this act of documentation is so important. Man, I was just thinking about this last week. Um, it slows you down. You're like, wait a minute, it slows you down. Well, why do I want to slow down? Because we're often in the system one brain when we're in the heat of trying to solve a problem because we feel like this pressure that we got to get done right now. Well, guess what? It's not conducive to a good analysis. You better slow it down a little bit. When you slow it down a little bit and you move into system two thinking, you are that's when, if you're four by, you go to four low, right? So we're gonna slow things down. We're gonna take our time. We're gonna methodically move through the event so that we understand all the contributors. And guess what? It doesn't move that slow. It moves pretty quickly once you get pretty good at this stuff. And it also moves quickly, more quickly overall than if you just take a scattershot approach to it because it's like clean as you go, and the job actually gets done with higher quality and with less work to do at the end, so whatever that job happens to be. All right. So let's do this. Nah, I'm not going to talk about the rest of that. I want to I'm going to spend a little time over here in Coslink building an example out so that you can kind of see how things go. Okay, so here's the example. I'm going to go plant shutdown plus injury. All right. So I'm gonna get into I'm going to go right to the chart. Okay, so no evidence, no problem statement, go right to analysis. And I'm even going to get rid of the sidebar. And I'm going to use a scenario. So here's the scenario, you guys. Man, all hell broke loose out there today. I had one of my generators offline at power generation station. I got one of my generators offline for 4 hours today, lost 50% of my output. It's a crappy day. Oh, wow. So you had a generator generator offline. And you said it took 4 hours to recover, right? And yes, I'm telling the story to myself. So yes, that's what I said. All right. So tell me a little bit more about that. So I know that, and guys, guess what? So I've got a little bit of I use templates. When I talk about like reliability type problems like this, I am always going to have two causes off of the focal point. One is it's going to tell me the story of what I call the fault path. Why is the gen offline? And then I've got the recovery path. Why did it take 4 hours to recover? Okay, so that's me using causal logic. That plus that equals that. And now I'm going to go why the Jenny was gone. The reason was, as we learned a little bit more, that we had a speed control alarm. Okay, and so you had a speed control alarm that occurred that brought the generator offline. Every time you have a speed control alarm happen, in other words, things going too fast, um, that brings the gen down. No, it doesn't, because this happens sometimes. What needs to happen is the operator also needs to acknowledge that alarm, or they need to bring the gen down because there's an actual problem. Sometimes we have if we had a sensor failure, for instance, then what we do is the operator has to go in, and I'm not exactly sure what's what there, but as long as if the operator does not acknowledge the alarm, then the machine is in self-protection mode, is going to shut itself down. So operator did not acknowledge alarm. Okay, in the allotted time. Speed control alarm trip, right? Or tripped or triggered. I'll choose my words later. So now this is the transitory cause. This is an omission, did not. Okay. And I can add in the non-transitory, which is speed control alarm. I'm going to shorten it a little bit. Speed control alarm requires acknowledgement within 60 seconds. This is what the alarm does. This is an attribute of the alarm, and this didn't happen, and this did occur. So these three line up, and then that's going to bring that gen down. 4 hours to recover, right? So you see what I'm doing here is I'm basically saying that plus that plus that. And then what that allows me to do is I can go further. Why did the speed control alarm trip? I had a faulty speed sensor. Okay. Faulty speed sensor caused the alarm to trigger. I can add more here if I want to, or I can continue in this pathway. I actually I'm going to say internal failure of speed control sensor, and that's probably going to stop me out unless we dig into this thing, which we normally don't do. We are likely going to be done at that point. If I've got a problem with a batch of these speed control sensors or some kind of a recall or something like that, I'm probably not going to be able to go much further unless I bring in some outside resources or something else, to dig into that a little bit more. So, and we can decide if we need to do that, we can, or we can leave it alone. Okay. Oh, I see Larry Saber. Larry, I'm glad to see you, buddy. You have a good one. I'll talk to you later, man. I owe you a response. Good to see you. See you, bud. Um, Now if I jump down, I can take each one of these out further. Like, why did the operator not acknowledge? Actually, I'm going to drag that there. That's because there were multiple alarms, right? So they got confused or they were overwhelmed a bit. And then also maybe a confusing HMI layout. We find out that, hey, wait a second here. We got alarms going off all the time. It's hard to know which ones we need to acknowledge and which ones we don't. It can be overwhelming, right? And then also the fact is that the HMI layout itself is sort of not conducive to us really understanding what's going on when we're in a multiple alarm situation. And in this case, guys, we just missed it, right? So you can kind of see here, I'm watching the time. I want to just keep doing this because the truth is that I actually really like building cause and effect analyses. I don't like the problems. I mean, I wish that this didn't happen, but this kind of approach of methodically going through here, I'll do one more level here. Usually when we're working on the issue, we've got some safety time, right? So let's say that we needed 30 mins to make the system safe. All right, well that's fine. I'm gonna go ahead and I'll stop that because in that case it wasn't really, it just is I'm documenting the amount of time it took. It wasn't abnormal or anything. I normally have some troubleshooting time. And this one was pretty quick. We knew that we had an overspeed alarm, and so we knew where the sensor was. And so I'm going to give this one about 15 minutes, right? So, but sometimes it takes a long time to troubleshoot an issue. In this case, it didn't. It actually happened relatively quickly, so we're not going to go much further. But then, of course, I've got the repair time. And so if I've got 30 minutes here, 15 minutes here, but I know I have 4 hours, so I'm going to say 3 hours and 15 to repair. Okay, and now I can drill further down this pathway and talk about Well, what accounts for all that repair time? And there are different elements that go into a repair. Expertise available, whether you had your spares, whether you had your, what about the testing time? Once you got everything buttoned up, you probably had to do some testing in order to make sure that everything was good. So I guess the way that I would sum this up, and you can see that actually we've built a pretty good chart here in a relatively short amount of time. Um, I, if we go all the way back to what I said earlier, the cause and effect chart is the way that we make sense of the event. It's our notation, it's our shorthand, and it ultimately becomes a not perfect, but a useful map of the causes of the problem. And for my hop friends, I'll tell you that I will not stop analyzing these causes until I get into the context of the issue, the contextual contributors, which are going to be out here a little ways further. It's for a different time when we can talk about that. But if I start methodically with the problem and I organize as I go and I utilize my cause and effect logic, I'm going to be in good shape. And usually, I get it pretty close on the first time. If I need to move some stuff around, no big deal, right? Listen, it's probably all we can do in an hour. I hope that that's helpful to you. I would tell you that you know where to sign up for this one. Well, guess what? I'm going to do an example RCA and a quality assurance issue. We're going to bump that one out to the end of July. You know why? Because who wants to attend webinars in the first part of July? Everybody's out and about, and I don't want to lead one either. So there you go. So I'm going to go out to the end. I already got it done though, by the way. I almost used it today, but I thought, no, don't do that. Save it for the end of July. We've got other ones too. They're all things that we think are interesting and useful. I would also tell you that under resources, we put these things up that we've recorded. So the last one I did was Is Hop Dead, right? So if you were on that one, then you know what I said. If you want to rewatch or review any of these, go do it. It's a great way to do it. And I think a lot of people actually do. I'm surprised. I see I think that people find it useful to be able to go back and see these things on their own time. And then dig this. I am doing my best to write blog entries, but here's one. Okay, so on these subjects as well. So you can, if you're like, yeah, I don't want to really watch him talk. I would rather just read what he said or what he wished he would have said. And that's usually what these are because I write them after the fact. I'm like, I get a second go at it, so it gives me a little more time to get things organized. And so all the information is here. And then at the bottom, we provide this to you through our online distribution application. It's called Flipping Book. It's pretty sweet. The thing here is that it provides this to you in a way, in a white paper format, very lightly branded. You can download it and then you can share it. Okay, so I think that's about enough for now. I would tell you that we would love to see you in one of our training courses. Public courses are out here. Oh, check this out. We just added a cause and effect charting only class. That will be what you've learned here, but we'll do 4 hours, right? We think that this is going to be something that people are going to like. 4 hours worth gives you enough time to practice, gives me a little more time, a little more room to, get the details out, but a very practical sort of charting only course. And this will be the first time that we've run it, and you can sign up for it here. All right. So, and I hope you all have yourselves a great weekend. The webinar is over, but I'm going to plug. Guess what? I'm playing tonight. My band. I play in an old guy band, and you're like, what kind of music? Hard original rock. Okay, Seattle rock. Is it grunge? There's no such thing as grunge. We never called it that ourselves, right? So, but yes, it's quite heavy and super fun and super loud. And we're playing with our other old people, not old guys. There's some old ladies there too, right? So it's all of us that played in bands in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, and now we do it again. And it's a good time. If you find yourself in Seattle, you want to come to Daryl's Tavern, I'd love to see you. I don't expect to see a single person from the webinar there, but that's what I'm doing in my spare time. So anyway, listen, I hope you all have a great one. I love doing these things, and I'll catch you the next time, right? When we do the quality assurance run through. Any questions or comments, get in touch, stay in touch, and that'd be that. Okay, so y'all take care. Bye bye.